The morning alarm screamed across every human colony in the galaxy. Commander Park Ji-ho barely had time to finish his coffee before the long-range sensors picked up something that made his blood run cold. 300 massive ships had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever built. "Sir, you need to see this," Communications Officer Kim Nari called out, her voice shaking slightly. She was trying to stay professional, but everyone on the bridge could feel the tension in the air. The main screen flickered to life, and what they saw made everyone go quiet. A towering alien figure stood before them, at least 9 feet tall with scaled skin that looked like it could stop bullets. 4 muscular arms crossed over its chest, and cold amber eyes stared directly at them through the transmission. This was no friendly first contact. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zerathi Empire," the creature spoke in perfect human language, which somehow made it even more terrifying. "We have conquered 400 worlds across this galaxy. Every species we have encountered has submitted to our rule. You are no different." Park Ji-ho felt his hands clench into fists. He had been preparing for this moment his entire military career, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. Behind him, his crew waited for orders, their faces pale but determined. The alien admiral continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You have exactly 72 standard hours to surrender unconditionally. Your governments will dissolve. Your military forces will stand down. Your people will serve the Empire in whatever capacity we deem useful. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact." Captain Lee Minho, Ji-ho's second-in-command, leaned over and whispered, "Sir, our intelligence reports were right. They've done this to everyone else. Complete conquest, total submission." But Admiral Kethvar wasn't finished. "If you refuse, we will demonstrate why resistance is futile. We will select your most populated worlds and reduce them to ash. We will continue this process until compliance is achieved. You have seen what happened to the Valdorian Republic. You know what became of the Centauri Federation. They thought they could resist us too." The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in deadly silence. Everyone knew about the Valdorians. An entire civilization of 12 billion souls, wiped out in a single day when they refused to surrender. The Zerathi had made sure the recordings were spread across the galaxy as a warning. "Sir," Kim Nari spoke up again, "we're receiving similar ultimatums on every colony frequency. They're broadcasting this to everyone simultaneously." Park Ji-ho stood up slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. The Zerathi fleet was massive, their technology clearly superior. Every conventional military analysis said humanity had no chance in a direct fight. But humanity had never been conventional. "Get me Fleet Admiral Shin Jae-won on Earth," he ordered. "Priority Alpha encryption." Within minutes, the weathered face of humanity's top military commander appeared on a secure channel. Shin Jae-won looked like he had aged 10 years in the past hour, but his eyes were sharp and focused. "Ji-ho, I assume you've seen our new neighbors," the admiral said grimly. "Every colony commander is reporting the same thing. 72 hours to complete surrender." "Sir, what are our orders?" Park Ji-ho asked, though he already suspected what. The answer would be Admiral Shin was quiet for a long moment, staring at something off-screen. When he looked back, there was something different in his expression, a hardness that spoke of decisions no human should ever have to make. "Commander Park, you are authorized to implement Scorched Earth Protocol. Send the activation codes to every colony, every outpost, every settlement. Authorization code, Phoenix Rising." The words hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Everyone knew what the Scorched Earth Protocol meant. They had all studied it, trained for it, hoped they would never have to use it. It was humanity's final answer to the question of slavery versus death. "Sir, are you certain?" Park Ji-ho had to ask, even though he already knew the answer. "Commander, our ancestors chose to die rather than live as slaves. They fought impossible, odds rather than accept chains. We are no different. If the Zerathi want our worlds, they can have them burned and poisoned. If they want our resources, they can dig them out of radioactive ash. If they want to rule over humanity, they will rule over graves." Kim Nari was already preparing the transmission equipment. Across human space, colony commanders were receiving the same authorization codes. On mining worlds, agricultural planets, research stations, and manufacturing centers, emergency protocols that had been planned for decades were finally being activated. The Zerathi had made one critical mistake in their assessment of humanity. They assumed that, like every other species they had conquered, humans would choose slavery over death. They had no idea that humans had spent their entire history proving that some things were worth dying for. And sometimes, some things were worth burning the entire galaxy for. The countdown had begun, and humanity was about to show the Zerathi. Empire, what happened when you corner a species that had already decided death was preferable to chains? Dr. Choi Suna stood in the control room of New Seoul's main atmospheric processing plant, her hands trembling as she entered the final sequence. Codes? Through the massive windows, she could see the sprawling city that had taken 3 generations to build. In 6 hours, it would all be gone. "Doctor, are you absolutely sure about this?" asked her assistant, Engineer Yang Do-hyun. His voice cracked slightly as he spoke. He had been born on this world, had never seen another sky except the one they were about to destroy forever. "The authorization came directly from Earth Command," Suna replied, though her own voice wasn't entirely steady. "Better our children breathe poison than breathe as slaves." She pressed the final button. Across New Seoul, the massive terraforming engines that had spent 50 years making the world habitable began their reversal sequence. The atmospheric processes started pumping toxic compounds into the air. The soil treatment plants began releasing chemical cocktails that would poison the ground for centuries. Meanwhile, on the mining world of Tiguk Prime, foreman Kang Seojin was saying goodbye to his life's work. He had spent 27 years carving tunnels through solid rock, extracting the rare metals that made faster-than-light travel possible. Now he was about to bury it all under millions of tons of collapsed stone. "The explosives are in position." "Sir," reported his demolitions expert Park Sun-woo, "once we trigger this, there's no going back. It'll take them decades just to clear the debris, assuming they even try." Seojin looked around at his crew one last time. These men and women had worked alongside him in the dangerous depths, trusting their lives to each other every single day. Now they were about to destroy everything they had built together. "Are the evacuation ships ready?" he asked. "Captain Han Minji confirmed all civilian transports are loaded and waiting," Sun-woo replied. "We're the last ones here." Seojin nodded and placed his hand on the detonation switch. "Then let's give these Zerathi exactly what they deserve, nothing but rocks and darkness." The explosions could be felt from orbit. Every mining shaft, every processing facility, every piece of equipment that had taken decades to install was buried under avalanches of stone and metal. The Zerathi could have the planet, but they would never have its treasures. On the agricultural world of Harmony Fields, farmer Lee Jinwoo walked through his crops one last time. The grain fields stretched to the horizon, golden waves that could feed millions. By tomorrow they would be black ash scattered on poisoned soil. His daughter, Park Yuna, found him standing in the middle of their family's wheat field, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Papa, the evacuation ships are leaving in 2 hours," she said softly. "We have to go." "I know, little one," he whispered, using the nickname he had called her since childhood, even though she was now 35 with children of her own. "I just wanted to remember this. Your grandmother planted the first seeds on this world. Now we're going to burn it all." "Grandmother would understand," Yuna said, taking his hand. "She escaped the wars on Earth. She knew what it meant to choose freedom over safety." Together, they walked back to the farmhouse where the poison dispensers were already spreading their deadly chemicals across the fertile fields. The Zerathi would find a dead world, where once there had been enough food to supply half a sector. Up in orbit, Admiral Kethvar watched the destruction from his command ship with growing confusion and anger. His tactical officer, a multi-eyed creature from one of their earlier conquests, tried to make sense of what they were seeing. "Admiral, the humans are systematically destroying their own infrastructure," the officer reported. "Every world is implementing the same protocols simultaneously. Are they trying to deny us resources?" Kethvar asked, his forearms gesturing in frustration. "Do they think this will make us show mercy?" "I don't understand their strategy, sir. They're not just destroying military targets or valuable materials. They're making their worlds completely uninhabitable, even for themselves. On the research station orbiting Kepler 442b, Dr. Kim Yejin was deleting 300 years of accumulated human knowledge. Star charts, scientific discoveries, technological innovations, cultural archives, everything that made humanity's expansion possible was being wiped from every computer system. "Professor, surely we should preserve some of this," pleaded her research assistant Oh Tae-hyun. "This knowledge could benefit the entire galaxy." "That's exactly why it has to go," Yejin replied sadly. "The Zerathi conquered 400 worlds. By using the knowledge of each species against the next, they will not have ours." As the data destruction continued, she opened a personal message from her son, who was somewhere in the evacuation fleet. "Mom, I know what you're doing is necessary. Take care of yourself. We'll build new knowledge together as free people." The Zerathi fleet moved closer to the human worlds, expecting to find frightened populations ready to surrender. Instead, they found empty cities filled with toxic air, poisoned farmlands that would take centuries to restore, collapsed mines that had been turned into underground graveyards, and research facilities that contained nothing but empty computers. Admiral Kethavar realized with growing horror that the humans hadn't been trying to negotiate better terms or deny the Empire resources. They had done something no other species had ever attempted. They had made surrender literally impossible. The dead worlds spun silently in space, monuments to a choice no rational species should ever make. But humanity had never claimed to be rational. They had simply decided that some things were worse than death, and slavery was one of them. Captain Han Minji gripped the controls of her ship as she navigated through the asteroid field, her heart pounding with every radar ping. The New Hope looked like nothing more than an old mining vessel from the outside, its hull scarred and patched to maintain the disguise. But hidden inside were 200,000 people from the colony of New Busan, packed into every available space. "Zerathi patrol coming up on our starboard side," whispered her navigator, Lieutenant Park Soon-ho, his eyes glued to the sensor display. "3 ships, scanning everything in this sector." Minji forced herself to breathe slowly. They had practiced this scenario 1,000 times, but practice was nothing compared to the real thing. One wrong move, one suspicious reading, and 200,000 lives would be over in seconds. "Everyone stay calm," she announced over the internal comm system. "We're just another piece of space junk to them." In the cargo holds below, families huddled together in the darkness. Children who had never known any world except New Busan clung to their parents, trying to understand why they had to leave everything behind. Elderly people who had spent their entire lives building the colony now sat in silence, watching their home disappear behind them. The Zerathi ships moved closer, their massive hulls dwarfing the human vessel. Alien voices crackled over the communication channels, speaking in their harsh, clicking language. The translation software picked up fragments, abandoned equipment, mining debris, not worth salvaging. Minji held her breath as the patrol. Ships passed by, dismissing her vessel as worthless scrap. As soon as they were gone, she allowed herself a small smile. The Zerathi had made their first mistake. They assumed that anything valuable would look valuable. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Generation ships disguised as cargo haulers, colony transports made to look like derelict freighters, and passenger vessels hidden inside fake asteroid mining operations. The greatest evacuation in human history was happening right under the noses of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. On the Freedom's Dream, Captain Yoon Ha-jun was dealing with a different kind of challenge. His ship carried the sea, survivors from 3 different worlds, and tensions were running high in the cramped quarters. "Captain, we have a situation in Section C," reported his security chief, Sergeant Kim Dae-ho. "Some of the folks from Terra Nova are saying we should have stayed and fought instead of running." Ha-jun sighed. He had expected this. Not everyone understood what they were really doing. Some people saw the evacuation as cowardice, not realizing it was actually the most dangerous military operation humans had ever attempted. "Get them together for a meeting," he ordered. "It's time they understood what we're really up to." An hour later, Ha-jun stood before a crowd of angry and confused civilians in the ship's main cargo bay. Their faces showed a mixture of fear, anger, and loss. These were people who had lost everything and didn't understand why. "I know you're angry," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed space. "I know you think we're running away, like cowards. But let me tell you what's really happening here." He gestured to the walls around them. "This isn't just an evacuation. This is the largest military operation in human history. Every ship in this fleet is a weapon. Every person on board is a soldier in a war the Zarathi don't even know has started." Yet, a woman from Terra Nova stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. "My husband died destroying our atmospheric processes. You're telling me that was part of some grand strategy?" "Yes," Hajun replied simply. "Your husband died to make sure the Zarathi got nothing but poison when they conquered your world. And now we're going to make them pay for every dead world, every lost home, every family torn apart." Meanwhile, deep in space, the coordination ships were managing the impossible task of keeping track of 10,000 vessels spread across hundreds of light years. Fleet Admiral Shin Jae-won had moved his command to the Phoenix, a massive ship that served as the mobile headquarters for the Exodus fleet. "Admiral, we have confirmation from Sector 7, reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Choi Nara. "All evacuation ships have cleared the Zarathi patrol zones. Total civilian extraction. 4,700,000,000 souls." Shin stared at the numbers on his screen, hardly believing what they had accomplished. In less than 72 hours, humanity had moved nearly 5 billion people without the Zarathi noticing. It was the greatest magic trick in galactic history. "What about our volunteers?" he asked quietly. "Skeleton crews remain on 47 worlds," Nara replied. "They're completing the final phases of the Scorched Earth protocols. On Earth, Commander Park Ji-ho was one of those volunteers. He stood in the empty control room of Lunar Base, watching the last transport ship disappear into hyperspace. In a few hours, the base's nuclear reactor would overload, turning the moon into a radioactive wasteland. "Sir, we should go," urged his aide, Ensign Lee Minho. "Our extraction ship is waiting." "In a minute," Ji-ho replied, looking at the Earth through the observation window. The blue marble that had been humanity's home for millions of years was about to become uninhabitable. But somewhere out in the dark between stars, humanity's children were already planning their return. The Zarathi had won empty victories over dead worlds, but they had no idea that humanity's real strength was now scattered across the galaxy, hidden in the void, waiting for the right moment to strike back. The Exodus fleet disappeared into dark space, following navigation routes through cosmic storms and gravitational anomalies that only human pilots knew how to navigate. The war was just beginning. 3 years had passed since the Great Exodus, and the Zarathi Empire was beginning to learn what it meant to fight ghosts. Supply Convoy 7 moved through what their commanders believed was completely secure space, carrying food, weapons and reinforcements to their struggling occupation forces on the dead human worlds. Commander John Hana watched the alien ships through, her stealth vessel's sensors, her crew silent and focused around her. The Shadow Strike was one of 50 ships in her squadron, each one invisible to Zarathi detection systems thanks to technology they had developed during their years in the void. "Target acquisition complete," reported her gunner, Sergeant O. "Taehyun, we've got clean shots on their command ship and 3 supply vessels. Remember, we hit fast and disappear faster," Hana whispered into her comm. "These aren't just supply runs we're destroying. Every ship we take down means their people on our dead worlds go hungry, go without ammunition, go without hope." The attack began without warning. Asteroids that had been floating peacefully in space suddenly accelerated to incredible speeds, guided by hidden mass drivers that the human fleet had placed months earlier. The rocks slammed into alien hulls with the force of nuclear weapons, tearing through their shields like they were made of paper. "Direct hit on the command vessel," Taehyun called out. "Their communications are down." But Hana's squadron wasn't finished. Small human fighters emerged from hiding spots behind asteroids and debris, their weapons systems modified with salvaged alien technology. They swarmed around the confused Zarathi ships like angry wasps, striking at engines and weapon systems, before vanishing back into the darkness. The entire battle lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. When it was over, the convoy was nothing but floating debris, and the human ships had disappeared completely. The Zarathi reinforcements that were supposed to reach their outposts would never arrive. Similar attacks were happening across the galaxy. The human Exodus fleet had broken into hundreds of smaller groups, each one operating independently, but following the same basic strategy. Strike without warning, cause maximum damage, and vanish before the enemy could respond. On the occupied world of Kepler Prime, Zarathi Governor Zethkar was dealing with problems he had never faced before. The human world was supposed to be a simple occupation. The population was gone, the infrastructure was destroyed, but at least the planet itself should have been secure. Instead, his forces were under constant attack by an enemy they couldn't see or track. "Sir, we lost another patrol last night," reported his aide, a nervous creature from one of the Empire's earlier conquests. "That makes 17 attacks this month. The humans appear out of nowhere, strike our forces, and disappear before we can respond." Zethkar slammed his 4 fists on his desk in frustration. "How is this possible? Our sensors show no human ships in this system. Our orbital defenses detect nothing." What the governor didn't know was that Captain Kim Seong was watching him from less than a kilometer away. The human resistance fighter had been living in the ruins of New Seoul for 6 months, using the destroyed city's underground tunnels as his base of operations. "Tonight, we hit their supply depot," he whispered to his team of 12 volunteers. "Remember, we're not trying to win battles. We're trying to make them afraid to sleep." That night, the depot exploded in a fireball that could be seen from orbit. The Zarathi lost 3 months' worth of supplies and had to request emergency reinforcements from other worlds. But when the reinforcements arrived, they found messages written in human blood on the walls of their command bunker. "We are everywhere. We are nowhere. We remember our dead." The psychological warfare was working better than anyone had hoped. Across the Empire, alien soldiers were reporting strange incidents, mysterious attacks, and unexplained equipment failures. Some claimed to see human ghosts in the ruins of destroyed cities. Others reported hearing human voices in the static of their communication systems. On the Zarathi homeworld itself, Admiral Kethvar was facing the worst crisis of his military career. The empire that had conquered 400 worlds was starting to fall apart, not from external invasion but from internal collapse. "Sir, we have rebellion on 14 worlds," his intelligence officer reported during their daily briefing. "The subject species are implementing their own versions of the human scorched earth protocols. They're choosing to destroy their worlds rather than continue serving the Empire." "Impossible," Kethvar snapped. "No species has ever chosen destruction over survival. The humans taught them something new, sir. They showed that slavery isn't inevitable. Word is spreading that if you make conquest too expensive, even the Empire will eventually give up." The economic reports were even worse. The dead human worlds were costing more to maintain than they produced. The constant attacks on supply lines meant that everything cost 3 times as much to transport. Morale among Zarathi forces was at an all-time low, with soldiers requesting transfers away from human space. Dr. Kim Yejin, broadcasting from a hidden location somewhere in the Exodus fleet, had become the voice of human resistance. Her messages appeared on screens across the Empire, somehow bypassing all their security systems. "People of the galaxy," her calm voice said during one broadcast, "you have seen what the Zarathi call victory. Dead worlds, poisoned skies, empty cities. Is this the future you want for your children? We chose fire over chains. We chose the void over slavery. You can make the same choice." The message was having its intended effect. Species that had served the Empire for centuries were beginning to question whether submission was really their only option. Some worlds were secretly building their own Exodus fleets. Others were preparing their own scorched earth protocols. Park Jae-hyun, now commanding one of the largest human battle groups, received daily reports of new allies joining their cause. Former Zarathi subjects were sharing intelligence, providing safe harbor for human ships, and in some cases actively sabotaging Imperial operations. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we have a message from the Centauri refugees. They're offering to share the locations of 17 Imperial supply bases." Jae-hyun smiled grimly. The Centauri had been one of the first species conquered by the Zarathi, their civilization destroyed decades ago. But survivors had been hiding in the outer rim, waiting for their chance at revenge. "Send them our thanks," he replied, "and tell them we'll make good use of that information." The Empire was learning that conquering humanity had been like grasping a handful of burning coals. The harder they squeezed, the more it hurt, and the fire was spreading to everything they touched. Admiral Kethvar stood in what used to be the most secure room on the Zarathi homeworld, staring at screens that showed the complete collapse of everything he had spent his life building. Reports flooded in from across the Empire, rebellions on 43 worlds, supply lines cut in 12 sectors, and 3 entire star systems declaring independence from Imperial rule. "Sir, we have another problem," his aide reported nervously. "The humans have somehow infiltrated our communication networks. They're broadcasting directly to every screen in the Empire." Before Kethvar could respond, every display in the room flickered and changed. Dr. Kim Yejin's face appeared, her expression calm but determined. Behind her, the vastness of space stretched endlessly, a reminder that humanity now called the void between stars their home. "People of the galaxy," she began, her voice carrying to billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. 5 years ago, the Zarathi Empire demanded our surrender. They promised us slavery or death. We chose a third option. On the mining world of Zereth 7, alien workers stopped their tasks to watch the broadcast. On the agricultural planet of Taurus Prime, subject species farmers gathered around communication devices. Even on heavily guarded military installations, soldiers found themselves listening to the human woman's words. "We burned our worlds rather than hand them over," Yejin continued. "We chose the cold darkness of space rather than the warm chains of servitude. We became ghosts, striking from the void, reminding the Empire that some things cannot be conquered." Commander Park Jae-hyun watched the broadcast from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Defiance. Around him, his crew worked, quietly, monitoring the reactions across Imperial space. This was the moment they had been building toward for 5 long years. "Sir, we're detecting massive communication traffic across all Imperial frequencies," reported his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Choi Nara. "It looks like subject species are coordinating something big." "The revolution has begun," Jae-hyun said quietly. "Send word to all human fleets. Operation Homecoming is now active." Across the galaxy, human ships that had been hiding in the dark spaces between stars began moving toward their targets. But they weren't alone anymore. Ships from dozens of other species joined them, former Imperial subjects who had learned from humanity's example that freedom was worth any price. On the former human world of New Sol, now a poisoned wasteland, that the Zarathi had spent billions trying to restore, Governor Zethakar received an emergency communication from his orbital defense commander. "Sir, we have incoming ships, hundreds of them. But they're not just human vessels. We're detecting Centauri refugee fleets, Valdorian survivor groups, and ships from at least 12 other species we thought were completely loyal to the Empire." Zethkar felt his blood run cold. "How many ships total?" "We've stopped counting at 3,000, sir, and more keep arriving. The battle for New Sol lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the planet flew a new flag. Not the banner of any single species, but a simple symbol showing broken chains against a field of stars. The Free Worlds Alliance had been born. Back on the Zarathi homeworld, Admiral Kethvar was dealing with the complete breakdown of Imperial authority. Economic reports showed that the cost of maintaining the Empire now exceeded all possible benefits. Military reports indicated that over 60% of Imperial forces were tied up dealing with rebellions and resistance movements. "Admiral," his economic advisor reported with a trembling voice, "the Treasury Council is demanding answers. The Empire is spending more resources trying to hold our conquests than we ever gained from making them. The human strategy has made conquest economically impossible. And militarily," added his military liaison, "our forces are spread too thin. Every time we reinforce one sector, 3 others explode into rebellion. The humans taught every species in the galaxy how to make themselves too expensive to conquer." Captain Han Minji, now serving as humanity's chief negotiator, arrived at the Zarathi homeworld aboard a ship that bore the flags of 47 different species. The once mighty empire that had demanded unconditional surrender was now asking for terms. The meeting took place in what had once been the Empire's throne room, Caithvar, looking older and more tired than seemed possible for his species, sat across from the human woman, who represented everything he had failed to destroy. "What are your demands?" he asked simply. "The same thing we wanted 5 years ago," Minji replied, "to be left alone, but now it's not just us. Every species you ever conquered, every world you ever claimed, every people you ever enslaved, they all want the same thing. And if we refuse, then you'll spend the rest of your civilization's existence fighting ghosts in the dark," said Park Jae-hyun, who had joined the negotiations. "We've proven we can live in the void. We've proven we can strike anywhere, anytime. And we've proven that the cost of tyranny can be higher than any empire can afford to pay." The negotiations lasted 3 days. When they were finished, the Zarathi Empire as it had existed for centuries was gone. In its place was a loose confederation of independent worlds, each free to govern itself as it chose. Dr. Kim Yejin made one final broadcast, this time from the rebuilt city of New Seoul, where human colonists were working alongside refugees from dozens of species to restore what had been destroyed. "Today, children across the galaxy will grow up free," she said, her voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "They will breathe clean air, not because they were given permission, but because freedom is their birthright. We chose fire over chains, darkness over slavery, and the void over surrender. And in the end, we discovered that sometimes the only way to save everything you love is to be willing to lose it all." The former Zarathi Empire became a cautionary tale told throughout the galaxy. Species learned that some conquests were too expensive to attempt, some peoples too dangerous to enslave, and some freedoms too precious to trade for safety. Humanity had returned from the darkness between the stars, not as conquerors, but as teachers. They had shown the galaxy that even the most powerful empire could fall if its subjects decided that chains were heavier than death. The age of easy conquest was over. The age of earned freedom had begun.